going on, guys? We're back out in the garage working on the 280Z, and we got some exciting stuff to do today. As you can see, I have a nice arrangement of parts, mostly from Apex Engineered here. We got the whole front suspension here. We also got some goodies there from BC Racing. And today, we're going to install those on the front of the 280Z. It is finally time to start installing some nice parts. Now, if you've been watching, we've got the underside of the car completely done. It is 100% rust free. It is primed, it is undercoated, it is ready to go. Taking it down off the rotisserie, so we are ready to move on and start on the 2JZ swap. To start the 2JZ swap though, we need our Apex Engineered suspension in because we need the motor mounts for the 2JZ, which bolt to their cross member, so we might as well do everything. So that's the plan. Today we are going to take all of these parts over here and we are going to put them on the front of this car. I got it up on the quick jacks. So off camera, I also threw a bunch of body panels back on. As you can see, we got the door, we got the fenders. I threw the hatch back on. I even threw the taillights in. Mostly just because I wanted to see this car looking more like a car because it hasn't looked this way in over a year. I even threw the headlight cones on, buckets, whatever you want to call them. And it's looking nice. Looking like a 280Z again. Didn't bother with the hood, although it'd be nice to get that on there, but it would be in the way to put the 2JZ in anyway, so I left the hood off. But anyways, we're gonna jump right on getting this Apex Engineered suspension in. I have gone over this already. It's all packaged very nicely when you get it. Everything's packaged nicely in the box. All the hardware is like vacuum sealed to cardboard with labels on it, what everything is. But I have already popped this apart. I mocked this up quite a while ago, because I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was getting into, that we weren't, missing a part or something like that, and then have to be a big holdup when we got to this part of actually installing it. So we're gonna do this today. This isn't gonna be a full how-to video. Apex Engineered has all the how-to videos on their YouTube channel. I'll throw a link down there if you guys haven't seen it, but they got good how-to videos for how to install all of this stuff. But we're gonna go through everything though. We're gonna do the full install of the front end today. I'll show you any important stuff. We'll go over everything, but if you want specifics, make sure you check out Apex Engineered's YouTube channel, just so you can follow along with their how-tos. Although it's fairly self-explanatory. And when you order your stuff from Apex, you can pick any color you want. They will powder coat this custom to you, whatever color you want. I went with a gray color because I'm still not sure what color I want the car. I wanted something underneath the car that would match basically any color that I happen to paint the body. I wouldn't want to do this, I don't know, bright orange or something like that, and then I make the car yellow. I don't know, just something that would clash. So I just went with a gray. If I change my mind on what color I want this, we can always pull it back off and get somebody to powder coat it. Not a big deal, some extra cost obviously, but all the pieces look very nice. Everything's all laser cut. They got the nice Apex logo cut into their front cross member. They got it on the front control arms too. A couple pieces of billet here for where your hubs bolt on. Everything's Heim joints. Every joint here is a Heim joint. So it's going to seriously stiffen up the front end, get rid of all those rubber bushings and everything that are 45 plus years old. And it's going to be stiffer even than changing to polyurethane bushings everywhere. Not necessary for a street car, and for some people it might be too harsh, but this isn't a daily driver, so that's not going to bother me at all. And honestly, stiffer suspension, I really don't care at all. Some people really like a nice soft suspension. Stiff, harsh suspension, I don't care. So we've also got the rack mounts here, billet rack mounts, the inner tie rods here. The 2JZ mounts are over there in the box still. And like I said, we got some nice BC Racing coilovers sitting here. Those have to be welded on to the knuckles because that's how Datsun did it back in the day. Even the factory suspension, the lower part of the shock is welded on to the knuckle, so we'll have to do that. Not a big deal. I will have to get that re-powder coated at some point. And we got some fresh wheel bearings over here ready to go on to those knuckles, but yeah, I'm happy with that, how everything looks here. And you can get whatever mounts you want. That's one big thing of originally why I lent towards going with a full suspension swap instead of keeping the stock suspension in, because I don't have to build motor mounts. You can get 2 JZ mounts, you can get LS mounts, you can get VQ mounts, you can get RB mounts, you know, the common engine swaps. If you go something with a less common swap, you would obviously have to build your own, but 2 JZ mounts came with it, so that makes it easier. I've already dropped 2 JZ in on this once just to try it out. I think I had it in a video a while back. Yes, when we built the transmission cross member. So I had the front cross member in the car at that point, so we could put everything in where it's got to go. So that's part of why I mocked this up previously, so that I could do that, build that transmission mount. Anyways, it's time. Let's start swapping this stuff in, and like I said, we'll start throwing that cross member in, and we'll move on from there. Now our cross member bolts through the original holes here. Obviously, this piece is from the original suspension, sits on top just to distribute some of the load. I don't know if you necessarily need to use it for this, but I'm going to, because this is a bit of a weak point on the front. There's not exactly a ton of strength here, so anything will help. So I'm gonna use that anyway. And it will get cleaned up and painted at some point. I just don't need to do it right now, because chances are everything on this car is going to be coming back apart at some point. And we're not going to tighten these all the way down, because we got other pieces we need to put on before we tighten this down to make sure everything goes in place and easily lines up. And just as a heads up, everything with the Apex kit is all standard sizes, not metric. So these take a 9/16, but we'll just snug these down, not quite tight. Next thing we're going to do is throw this tension rod bracket in. Our normal tension rod from the factory bolted in right here with just a single bolt going through, or a nut on the other side, and come over here and connect it to the control arm. But our new design is a little bit different, so we got this bracket that has to go in. This goes where the factory tension rod bolted in on the back side. It goes in here just like this, and this little bracket here helps stiffen up this whole area right here, because this is another weak point with the front end. And we actually will have a bar that bolts onto this side and comes off and goes to the cross member. You'll see that'll be the next step. That way we triangulate the whole front end and really stiffen it up. So we got to throw this in temporarily real quick. So just as a couple little helpful tips when you go to put this together, what I found, assemble this first, because you got a little bolt right here that bolts these two brackets together. This is where your tension rod is going to mount. So there's a little bit of play in it to get a little bit different angle, to make sure everything fits nice and tight. So you put that bolt in, snug it down, because you can't get at that. Make sure you stick these two bolts in first though, these two carriage bolts, because as you can see, once you get it together, they don't come back out. This one will. And then you got this aluminum spacer back here that fits into your hole nicely here to keep everything aligned. So make sure you get everything in there first. It's a little fiddly to get everything in there. And actually, speaking of that, let me show you something. This I did before, obviously, but see there's 3 holes there. Right here. Maybe you'll see better if I stick the light behind it. Those are not there from the factory. So you do have to drill those. What I found is to just take that piece without the bolts in it, mock it up, and mark some holes. It's super simple. Go a little bit oversized so you got a little bit of play, and it'll all go together. So yeah, we're just gonna get this in there now. Just make sure everything goes together. It's a little fiddly, like I said, to get it all in there because of the different angles, but it will go together. Not sure, I could have taken that carriage bolt out. That would have helped a little bit, but I got it. So that's all we need to do for now. It's obviously not in there fully, but we're gonna go put that tension rod on the inside because that uses these same 3 bolts. So in here is where that tension rod brace goes, and you can see that really strengthens up the front end. triangulates everything right here, stiffens this part up, which like I said is a weak point in the front end. This bolt uses a big 1/2 inch Allen, so make sure you got a nice long Allen socket to get in there. Throw this side together, that way we still got wiggle room and everything. So now we should be good to snug everything down. And I'm going to start with these big bolts back here, 15/16 socket, just because there's probably the least wiggle room in that. You know, they got one hole and that's it. All right, we're cruising right along, so now we can snug these bolts down. And Apex does list a lot of the torque specs for everything, so again, check their videos out if you want to get exact torque specs. I'm honestly not that worried about this, just get them tight. Now we're going to mount up our control arm and our tension rod here. So obviously I've already got everything together. We got our heim joints here, our bolts here that bolt it through. This is our adapter for our hub on our ball joint here. Obviously the tension rod. This is the sway bar end link. We're not really doing anything with that right now, but I figured to stick it on there so we can get a good visualization. Now one thing that is important to do to start off with is to get this suspension geometry and dimensions the same as the factory. That way we can then build off of there. And by that I mean the length of the control rod and the length of the tension rod, because that's going to affect all of the angles in the suspension. If we start with something close to the factory lengths, then we can again build off of there, change our camber, caster, toe, all of that stuff. So I went ahead and measured the factory control arm between the center of the ball joint and the center of the mounting hole on the cross member, basically where this would pivot up and down. And that is exactly 11 inches. So we'll grab our tape measure here, and measuring that right now, we're at about 12¼ inches. Now I also measured the length of the tension rod. This is what sets our toe in the car. And so we definitely want that close to what it's going to be. And make sure when you're doing this, you don't just adjust one side, you adjust it with the actual rod, because if you don't, you'll have one heim joint threaded all the way in or all the way out and the other one partial away. So you lose adjustment, you lose strength. You could back one side out completely and, you know, be in trouble then. And we'll get these perfect once we get it on the car and it's time to do an alignment or, you know, get it finalized. Right now we're just trying to get it close. All right, I'm hoping you can see well, because this is a bit fiddly here to get these together. This is our heim joint here. You got these little adapters that go on each side. And then on here, if you can see, we got adjustments here, 5 different adjustments. We're going to go with the center adjustment to start. And there's some specialized stuff to get this together. You got these little collars here that basically fit in right here, the hole that you want it in. So what we got to do to get everything right is you got to put your collar in the hole you want. You can adjust this once you've got everything in there loosely too. You don't necessarily have to have it in the hole you want right now. We got our bolt here. We've also got 3 washers that go on the inside here. Between, basically going to go on the outside of these spacers between the brackets here on the cross member. That allows you to change the, I believe, the caster a little bit. Basically move your pickup point further forward or back To start with, they recommend putting 2 in the front, 1 in the rear. So we're gonna get this in here, and I'm actually gonna stick this just down in the bottom hole and we'll move it after. So we'll put 2 washers on in here and 1 washer in the back. And then our spacer on the back and our nut. So that's basically what it looked like. Like I said, bolt coming through here, that first little spacer thing, 2 washers, that spacer adapter thing, Heim joint, the little adapter, another washer, that's adapter spacer thing here for adjustment up and down, and your nut. Make sure you tighten that down good. Now we'll throw the tension rod on our mount. And this one's a little bit easier. You don't need those collars. You don't need any spacers in between. But we're going to start with the middle hole. Again, just because it gives us adjustment in every direction. So now you can see what I'm talking about with your Heim joints. If you can see in there, if the lighting's good enough, this one's at an angle. Our control arm's going to be somewhere around level, right? So obviously that's not going to work. I didn't tighten this 100% down, so make sure you get that as square as you can at approximate ride height, and it would probably be a good thing to check once you have it at actual ride height. That way it doesn't bind up as it goes up and down. You know, if you got this right sideways like this at ride height, and you try to go down, it's going to bind right there, which will not work well. Your suspension will not work properly, and it'll start wearing these Heim joints. Now, like I said, I've got everything on here. Actually, my boot's kind of messed up here. Our ball joint is already in here with our nut, with a cotter pin. That's good to go. So now the next step is going to be to put our knuckle on, but before we can do that, we need to weld on our BC coilovers. Now look at these beauties. I can't wait to try these out. But as you can see, this is not like a normal shock. There's no mounting bolts down here like you would normally have. Weld on just like that. So that's what we got to do. So naturally we have a left and a right one of these. So the only difference is the ears for your brake caliper. If you're running Apex's big brake kit, this is what you would use here, these two. If you're running 370Z brakes, you use these two, and that's my plan right now. So I'm going to set this one up as the right-hand side, the passenger side, because you want the ears for the caliper you're going to run towards the rear because of clearance issues. And the BC coilovers do have a front left and a front right. So this one says FR, that one obviously says FL. But the only thing that's going to be different is this little bracket on here to hold your brake line. So let's say you got it backwards, all you got to do is swap that bracket from one side to the other. So it's really not a big deal. And we obviously don't want to ruin the shock here, so you want to take the lower mount off, you know, the body of your coilover off of the shock body so that you don't ruin it when you weld. Now, if you don't have the capabilities of welding these on, Apex will weld on your coilover sleeves for you. If you buy their suspension and you buy their coilovers, I think it's like $100 extra. They'll weld them on right there, or if you buy BC coilovers, you can send your coilovers to them when they make your suspension, and they'll weld them on and send everything back. And everything would be all powder coated also. They would powder coat the whole body right here, the same as your knuckle. So that is an option. I elected to do it myself just because I wanted to. But yeah, we'll get it welded on. It seems everyone puts them on this way, so this little notch right here is in the back, puts the BC logo sticker this way. I don't know why it would matter. I was originally going to do it that way, but since everybody else seems to do it this way, I'm going to do it this way because there must be a reason. And we're just going to lay a nice hot bead after we get it tacked in place. It's probably a good idea to throw some tape on there too, just to protect the body from the MIG spatter. You know, that's up to you. And I also turned it upside down because it'll be easier to get a nice bead instead of trying to weld up underneath. Here we go. Pretty easy process. I got that all fully welded all the way around. Plenty of penetration. It is a bit hard to get back here between, you know, this face and the shock body. Just do the best you can if you're welding this. I mean, it's not hard. It's just a bit tough to get your MIG welder tip in there. And I still think that that little half circle cutout would be better out here, because that made it even harder to weld back here because I had to try and fill that in. I think by design it was supposed to go out here. It's really not going to matter at all, but I think it would have made more sense and been easier to weld to put that on the outside. But we're where we are, so we got to move on. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, get some of this weld spatter off. Oh, by the way, I did have a little bit of trouble on this one. I didn't quite get it clean enough, apparently, get all the powder coating off. Had some contamination in it, got quite a bit of bubble right here, so I had to grind it out and re-weld it a couple times. But it's good now, so I'm gonna clean those up like I mentioned, get all this weld spatter off, throw some primer and probably some gloss black paint on there for now, and we'll move on. There we go, got them all cleaned up, painted up. They're looking pretty nice. I mean, it's just rattle can spray paint, but it'll do for now. Like I mentioned, I might re-powder coat everything. We'll see if I decide I want to change color of everything. So we'll take final care of those at some point. So now it's time to mount those in the car. However, there's something that I didn't realize needed to be done before mounting these coilovers in the car, and I'll show you what it is. So if we shove the coilover up in here, as you can see, you can't really access the knob for adjusting the damping, and you also can't get at your Allen bolts to adjust camber. So we got to fix that. And you can see over here, it looks totally different. I trimmed out that center section there so that we can, if we throw this up in there. So now we have plenty of room to access the knob for damping adjustment and access the Allen bolts for adjusting camber. So I wish that's something I would have realized before I painted and undercoated the bottom of the car, just so I wouldn't have to grind on some metal that was just freshly painted from underneath. Because yeah, I'm not actually grinding underneath right, but you know, grinding in here is going to affect that paint under there. You know, I don't know if it chipped off or anything. I haven't looked underneath, but we'll fix it in the future. It's not that big of a deal. We got to do it anyway. So we got to cut this one out, and this is how I did the other side. I took off the majority of it with a hole saw just like this. This is 1 7/8 inches, and then I just took a burr bit and worked it around there, and it actually goes pretty easy. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do this side to match the other side so that our coilovers fit perfectly. There we go. Simple as that. It's nice and clean. Smooth around all the edges and everything. It's good to go. So now I'm just going to throw some primer on there real quick just to, you know, keep it from rusting while we're working on the car. Now, that probably weakens this a bit. I mean, you're taking away structural metal. This isn't just sheet metal here. It's nice and thick, way thicker than the regular sheet metal in the car. You know, this whole cap right here for the top of the strut tower is a lot thicker metal. So I don't think it's going to be an issue though. One, because I did weld here and here on both sides, and we also did here and here. And I didn't take off all the weld. It's still welded together in there. I did take away most of that weld though in those two areas where I cut that out right here. But anyways, we're gonna have a strut tower bar on here anyway, so that'll clamp right on there and spread the load out. So, you know, you got like these little ears right here are kind of exposed, right? But I think that just having that strut tower bar on there to clamp on there and really spread the load around the top of the shock tower should be plenty strong enough. And we have to do it for the coilover anyway. I guess there's not no way around it. You could run it as it was, but every time you wanted to adjust something on the coilover, especially the camber, you'd have to unbolt the top of the coilover, adjust it, put it back up in, which isn't the end of the world. And if that's how you want to do it, I'm sure it would be fine, but I chose to do it this way just so we don't have to do that. Now it's time to pop the coilover in. Now we'll bolt our knuckle on. Make sure you got this facing forward because we got a front rack. You could bolt it on backwards, I think, but make sure you got it going forward anyway. Now we got to stick our wheel bearing on. This is a 370Z wheel bearing. Just an OEM replacement. You can pick them up any auto parts store, wherever you want to get them. They don't come with the kit. You do have to source these yourself. But yeah, they're just for any 370Z front and rear. Make sure you get all four. And one thing you got to do is pop this little cover off because we don't need it. I believe torque spec's 65 foot-pounds, but I'm just going to tighten them down. Easy as that. All right, with all that stuff done, we've only got one thing left, which is the steering rack. So I got this all cleaned up. Got all the surface rust off, primed, painted it, it's ready to go. I changed the inner tie rod ends. The Apex kit comes with them. These are the OEM ones. It's a pretty simple process if you've never done it before. It's pretty self-explanatory. So, change those. I got new boots. These are not for a 280Z. I don't know what they're for, but I saw on the forums people were suggesting these. They are AC Delco part number 194-61370 if anybody wants to try them. They fit good but not quite perfect. They're a little big on the big end, and they just come with wire ties to hold them on, but I got some good metal clamps coming. I hope that'll be good enough to get them nice and tight on there. We don't have to worry about dust getting in. The other end's fine. And by the way, you do have to change these inner tie rod ends. One, because they're 40, 50 years old. It's probably just a good thing to do anyway. But the OEM ones are opposite threads on each side. One's left-hand thread, one's right-hand thread. The Apex kit, both of the outer tie rod ends are both right-hand thread, so you have to at least change one, and you might as well change both anyway while you're in there. So we got this all ready to go, other than we do have some energy suspension polyurethane bushings to go on here, so we're going to throw those on, and then it's time to put them in the car. Now the kit comes with new billet aluminum lower rack mounts. You have to have those to fit on here because it doesn't mount to the subframe the way that the OEM rack does. I opted to get also the upper rack mounts. You can use the original ones to just stamp steel, but I opted, since we're doing this, to get the billet upper mounts. The kit also comes with steering rack spacers, so you can raise up the steering rack to keep your steering geometry. As you lower your car, the tie rods would start pointing up towards the wheels, which causes a lot of bump steer. So depending on how much you lower the car, you'll want to stick one or two of these in there potentially. But for now, since I don't know how it's going to look, we're just going to throw it together without any spacers. So now we gotta stick our tie rod ends on. I got the low profile studs because my thought when I ordered this stuff was I was gonna be running 15-inch wheels. That was my goal. It's not gonna happen. I've changed my mind. We're gonna go with 17s because I need the room to clear the 370C brakes. They offer a regular size that's a lot longer on this end, but it comes with misalignment spacers and bump steer spacers, so I think I'm gonna upgrade and buy those. But we're going to stick these on for now, and I found the easiest way. This little Allen bolt doesn't like to come out, so I found the easiest way was to stick it on here first and tighten it down, and then we can loosen that up. And this gets torqued to 60 foot-pounds. Well, would you look at that? Very happy with how that stuff went together. It's honestly pretty simple to put together. Everything seems well made. If you need specifics, like I mentioned before, on putting any of this stuff together, look at Apex Engineered's YouTube channel. They got directions for everything, I believe. I didn't mention it before, but this is just their regular kit, their street kit. They also have the Track Attack kit, which adds an upper control arm on the front and rear. The rear actually has coilovers that are inside the vehicle, which is pretty cool, but it's not something I needed. So this thing is all together now. We got the entire front end together, except the sway bar, because I haven't ordered that yet, but that is not part of the Apex kit anyway. And the 2JZ engine mounts are not on there right now. These are the adapters for engine mounts, whichever engine mount you get. Obviously, these will bolt onto the engine itself, and they go in something like that. But Other than that, everything on the front is together. Obviously, I need my brakes too. I haven't even ordered the 370Z brakes yet, but those obviously will have to be put on. But yeah, all in all, very happy with how this kit went together. Still gonna do the rear. That'll be the next video, I believe. We got the Mustang rear diff that's gonna go in that too. So we'll go all over that. And we're gonna build the rear axles, so that's a little something different. But next video, we'll work on the rear, get that all done. The front, all done. Very happy, highly recommend this kit so far. Obviously, I have not driven it yet because, you know, it's still sitting in here. But that's where we're at. I'm gonna end this video off now. Let me know if you got any questions. If you're looking at the Apex kit, trying to decide on if you wanna buy it for your 240, 260, 280Z, I'll answer any questions you got. Leave them in the comments and come back for the next video when we do the rear kit. Oh, and pick up a Block Garage t-shirt.